Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. We've got some interesting data to check out today. This is going to be a little bit of a broader survey of some of the areas that I keep an eye on, ranging from housing construction to what current inventory and sales numbers we're seeing in other parts of the country. So let's jump in and take a look. There's some really, I don't know if you want to call it shocking, but it's definitely slightly earth-shaking, I guess we could call it. Now, the first one on cue today comes to us from CNBC. The headline is, Housing Starts Decreased 22.3% in March. Remember, that's March. That's not April. Versus 15.6% decrease that was expected. So, the pros out there were expecting us to see a 15.6% drop in housing starts, and we ended up with 22.3. So what is that? What is the impact on us in terms of buyers, sellers, and investors? Now, clearly, that reduces the inventory. That by itself is ridiculous and impactful news. Now, that's obviously across the country. It's going to be interesting to see how that affects various regions. My guess is this will impact some areas more than others, as most of this data tends to. But given what else we're hearing in these other numbers, I mean, one reason why I'm sort of grouping all of these stats together is because I want to give you a sense of what the market feels like. And when we talk about the market, you need to understand what your local market is. But this is going to be sort of a broader brush to sort of paint the market with. But we're also going to check in on a few marketplaces that are interesting ones to watch. I often refer to these markets as the canaries in the coal mine, right? When things start going bad there, you should start looking at your own marketplace. So if you're someone who's a buyer, this should be a concern to you because it means your level of choice is going to be lower. Right, there's going to be fewer homes per buyer on the marketplace than you are even seeing now, right? Because this is a future indicator. This is an indicator of what new homes on the market you are going to see in 4 months, in 3 months, in 6 months, whatever it may be, based on this. That means that you're going to see fewer homes on the marketplace. The only other source of homes for sale is sellers, current owners of homes who decide they want to get their home sold. Not a lot of optimism that that's a thing that's going to happen a whole lot in the coming months. But what I'm seeing is not a reduction in the amount of demand, at least in my local marketplace. And again, this is something you'll want to find out in your local marketplace what's true. But I'm not seeing a big drop in the number of buyers. I have got several different buyer-focused efforts going on right now in terms of advertising and those sorts of things. And I am not seeing any kind of drop in the number of folks who are inquiring about properties. Now, I do tend to see far more inquiries about properties that are priced sort of below the average mark, but the demand is still there. There are still plenty of folks who want to be able to buy a home, despite the fact we have incredible unemployment right now due to the coronavirus situation. So there you have it. That's the first thing. The first thing is future stuff, right? We're trying to look over the horizon to see what we can expect from the markets. And this dramatic decrease in housing starts is absolutely the opposite of what we need. We were already in a scenario where we didn't have enough homes getting built, at least here in my marketplace. So this is not good news. And it's a turnaround from what we saw in the first couple of months of the year. If you go back to shows I did in January, say in February, we were actually seeing pretty encouraging numbers relating to the number of housing starts and the number of homes we were expecting to come online. So this is a definite setback from those numbers we saw in the first couple of months of the year. Okay, home building, and this is still on the subject, had its worst month since 1984, right? So that's that's what they're kind of talking about. U.S. home construction in March endured its worst, and this is also from CNBC. U.S. home construction in March endured its worst monthly decline since 1984, as housing starts fell by over 22% from the previous month. Homebuilder confidence was also pummeled, with one key indicator seeing the biggest drop in its 35-year history. Now, we've talked a lot about homebuilder confidence before, and one of my main arguments has always been pay less attention to that number, but pay more attention to the things that do or don't feed it, right? It's more, if someone comes and asks you, how do you feel about something, but you then take actions that indicate you don't quite feel that way, well, I'm going to pay more attention to the actions, right? So if a few months back, builder confidence was sort of stagnating, but we were seeing increased billings for architectural firms. We were seeing increased requests for permits, all of these kinds of things that indicate that folks are building. So that was a little bit of a disconnect from the stat in terms of what actions were actually being taken. This shows us that in addition to the confidence level dropping, as we talked about a moment ago, the actual starts, the actual permits, the actual actions that they're taking reflect the same thing, that they are not confident about what's going on and they're not moving forward with construction. Of course, this has affected home construction stocks. So there's not really anything really awesome there in terms of getting a grip on where this might lead. Now, my hope is that we see this being sort of a short-term thing. And as soon as we can get back to maybe a little bit more openness in terms of folks being able to go out, go back to work, those types of things, this might change. Okay. Next on our list of things to look at is housing inventories, right? The theme, I guess, overall for today is housing inventories. And what we're seeing is a pretty dramatic drop in the amount of inventory that's in the marketplace without an equal drop in demand. So while demand may drop, while some buyers may step away from the marketplace because they're concerned about coronavirus or because of the lockdown or because of unemployment, we are seeing that the number of homes being taken off the market or not entering the market is actually dropping. So the supply is dropping at a much greater rate than the demand, which is just going to push up prices, which is obviously not what I think a lot of folks want, at least in my local marketplace. It's, again, what I'm hoping is that by covering some of these national numbers, you can look at your local marketplace and see what's happening for the ground truth where you are. Okay. So the Realtor magazine put out some interesting statistics. This came out May 11th, so this is extremely new information. New listings are down nearly 45% in April, so that's very recent numbers, right? That's just this last month. Compared to March, as the COVID-19 pandemic pushed housing inventory to a new April low. The housing market, already starved for new listings prior to the pandemic, now faces an even tighter supply. The Northeast saw the largest drop in new listings, down 59.4% in April. Now, this is year over year. We're gonna discuss the year over year numbers here in a second because they're just mind blowing. The Midwest saw a 49.5% drop, while the West posted a 44.1% decrease, and the South saw a 31.4% decrease. So let's look at what some of just the top decliners are. These are metro areas. And the number of new listings year over year in the Milwaukee, Waukesha, West Allis, Wisconsin area, down 80% from a year ago. Right? Detroit, Warren, Dearborn, Michigan, down 75.3%. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, down 74.8%. Buffalo, Cheektowaga, Niagara Falls, New York, down 69.5%. Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, 68.8% down. New York, Newark, New Jersey, New York and New Jersey, Pennsylvania, 67.9% decline. Rochester, New York, 58.2%. San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward market, 56.1% decline from the same time last year. So a market that was already crazy in terms of elevated prices due to low supply, like San Francisco, is now seeing a ridiculous decimation in the amount of inventory. This list goes on for a while. Los Angeles is down 50%, Miami, Fort Lauderdale down 50%, Baltimore, Columbia, Maryland down 50.2, San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, one of my primary service areas, down 51.5%, Chicago, Naperville, Elgin down 53.2. So all across the board in these major metro areas, we're seeing huge declines from 1 year ago, and that's really just to make sure you're correcting for seasonal things. That's a big deal. So those areas are seeing a huge drop in inventory. And keep in mind, this is not new construction. This is not focused on new construction. This is focused just on the inventory. This is just focused on homes for sale. So what have we got at this point? We've got new construction ebbing, not just ebbing, dropping dramatically, right? And that's a future predictor. In the market right now, we are seeing dramatic drops in the number of homes that are currently listed on the marketplace. We'll get into a little bit of ground truth here in a second. I have some very local Morgan Hill properties that very much illustrate what's happening in terms of inventory right now. But this is now both sides of the supply equation. There's really only two ways homes get on the market, right? One is you build one, or one is you sell one that you already own. Both of those hugely impacted. All right. Now, this is sort of a side one. I threw this in here because I think this is important, because for those of you who were around for the downturn last time, the 2006 through 2008 downturn, this is something that happened pretty quickly when things started getting hectic, and that is that banks are now halting HELOC loans. I actually had a standing HELOC loan when this downturn happened back in the 2006 to 2008 range. And I just got a letter that just closed it. It was that there was a card associated with it, and it just said, card's no longer valid. You're not allowed to charge on that. We've halted all HELOC, not only existing ones, but any new one. No new ones, no existing ones, just gone. This definitely illustrates the level of concern that we're seeing on the part of banks. Another thing that concerns me is, while there's a lot of talk about how we're going to push mortgages forward, or how we're going to try to deal with the fact that these folks are supposed to be sheltering in place and now don't have a job, eventually, no matter how much elbow room, I guess, that you give to a scenario, eventually these monies are going to come due. And I think that what we'll find is that this will not be able to help but increase foreclosure rates. Now, I did a show on foreclosure rates a while back. You can check that out if you like. But I'm not going to be surprised when we start to see foreclosure rates increasing. There may be in the past, this would have been a Christmas time thing, right? A lot of banks would say we're going to halt any foreclosure activities until after Christmas. So maybe from October, November, December, they're not going to be doing any foreclosures. And then it kicks back in January, February. I think eventually these things have to happen. There's only so many checks that can get written to different institutions relating to the lockdown. And at some point, these monies are going to come due. And I think a lot of folks are going to see that it just doesn't make sense for them to continue to make their foreclosure payment or their housing payment in some areas, or they simply can't. It's just not a possibility for them. However, unlike last time, where this scenario was also linked with a set of circumstances where home values were dropping like a stone, this is one where home values are going to increase by and large in a lot of these areas, right? Inventory is now ridiculously reduced because of these circumstances, but buyer demand is not being reduced at the same rate. So as a comparative thing, what you'll actually end up seeing is homes selling for more in a faster time frame. And we're actually seeing some ground truth of that right now in my local market. All right, next, here's a couple of other areas of the country. Now, I picked this one because I think of all communities or metro areas that would be representative of a ridiculous impact to this. I can't imagine a community that would be more hit than this one, right? We're talking about Las Vegas. Think about Las Vegas. When people go to Las Vegas, they don't tend to drive, they tend to fly, right? Nobody's flying. In terms of sheltering at home, how many business interests in Las Vegas don't rely on people coming together? Whether we're talking about casinos, hotels, shows, whatever, all the things that Las Vegas offers, all the economic pillars that maintain Las Vegas as a viable, sustaining community, probably 95% of them are now completely cut, right? How many cab drivers are there in Vegas? I mean, if we just want to start there, how many waitresses, how many bartenders, how many folks work in Cirque du Soleil that are not circing or soleilling right now? So Las Vegas is the poster boy for, if any community is going to get hit hard, it's going to be Las Vegas. Now, Las Vegas real estate in April, sales down 33% year over year, inventory down 16%. So overall sales are down 33% and inventory is down. The total number of homes is down 16%. Now, that's actually kind of interesting. I'm actually surprised it's not a whole lot worse, to be honest. I'm surprised that that in this particular scenario, we're not seeing sales down more than that. Despite the coronavirus, the number of so-called distress sales in April remain near historically low levels, which is interesting. The association reported that short sales and foreclosures combined accounted for 1.5% of all existing local property sales in April. That compared to 3% of all sales just 1 year ago, 2.5% 2 years ago, and 8.4% 3 years ago. It wouldn't surprise me if, given how long this is going, that changes sometime soon. I think that the amount of impact on a city like Las Vegas is going to be pretty dramatic. All right, so next on our list, this is another one I like to look at, Seattle. Real estate in April. Again, April numbers. So the most recent month for which we have numbers. Sales down 25%. Year over year, inventory down 31%. So if we're just looking at those numbers, Las Vegas, the number of sales is down by more, but the inventory isn't down as much as it is in Seattle. So I think this illustrates the case here that while the inventory goes down a whole lot, sales continues year over year to be able to at least keep up with that. So I didn't see any numbers here on actually average price. I mean, I'd love to see what's happening in terms of days on market, average price in Seattle. My guess is that, like my local area, which I can give you information on, that we're seeing those things increase. All right, next. We've talked about the builder side, right, in terms of confidence. Consumer confidence in housing has now fallen to the lowest levels since the subprime crash. After falling sharply in March, and this again is from CNBC, housing confidence among consumers took an even deeper dive in April, according to Fannie Mae Home Purchase Sentiment Index. It hit the lowest level since November of 2011. As a comparison, 46% of those surveyed said it was a bad time to buy a home, while 65% said it was a bad time to sell a home. Now, clearly the reasons why, I think if we're thinking logically here, the reason why someone might say it's a bad time to sell a home has a whole lot to do with the coronavirus scenario, rather than any maybe inherent concerns about values, other than what they might see as impacts from the coronavirus on home values directly. Now, in my case, let me give you an example. I have a hands-on example that's literally in my community, and this sort of links into the pocket listing argument I was making last month, of the last show, where I argued that pocket listings are a horrible thing. Now, May 1st marked a new rule change that went into effect for the Association of Realtors, making pocket listings not something that's allowed. They actually will get fined by the association if they do them, unless they are willing to adhere to some very specific limitations that would basically make it almost impossible to sell a home using a pocket listing. I can get into that in another show at another time if you want to hear more about that. But I had a home that was right nearby that was a pocket listing, and it was not selling. It had been on the market for a couple of months, and it wasn't getting sold. And my argument was, and I think this illustrates the difference. This is a home that might fall into the luxury category. It was priced right about where the luxury market starts in my community, and it was not selling. May 1st, they converted it to an MLS listing, and it is now contingent. They have accepted an offer. Okay, so 10 days later, They had an offer that they accepted. I believe they actually got the offer 3 days ago, 4 days ago now. So it actually got into sold within a week. If anything illustrates how bad pocket listings are, it's that. So any other area, now this was a National Association of Realtors policy change. I, for one, think it's a good thing. I'm not sure I agree with everything about the rules that have been put into place, but I think in general, sellers are going to benefit more from this. But let's talk about that offer. Now, obviously, it's contingent. I'm not a party to the transaction, but my understanding is they got asking price or higher in that time frame. So as soon as it went to the MLS, which is the largest grouping of folks who have expressed an interest in buying a home, that are doing it through a real estate agent, that are likely pre-qualified and ready to go, it took only about 7 days. It only took about a week for that home to get into contract for what sounds like full asking price. So kind of two birds with one stone with that example. One, pocket listings are terrible for sellers. And two, that we're seeing still a very robust marketplace. The thing sold ridiculously quick once it went to the MLS, and it sounds like it's sold for asking price or higher. Now, to get some ground truth in terms of what's happening right here in Morgan Hill, if we compare what homes were selling for a year ago versus what they're selling for today, we can look at it in two different ways. We can look at it in what's the average sales price of a home right now in Morgan Hill. Then we can also look at how much above or below asking price are homes tending to get. Now, this time last year, in April of last year, homes were selling for 99.4% of list price, so whatever the seller was asking for it. In April of 2020, homes are selling, or it did sell in April, for 100% of asking price. So on average, homes were selling for their asking price. A lot, and that depended on price range. We had some banding where at different price ranges we were seeing homes selling for above or below asking price. You tended to see folks going for above average, above asking price and below average pricing. Once you got into the luxury space, things tended to hug right at or just below the asking price. So when we look at these numbers, what we learn from it is that while the average price of homes is down in Morgan Hill, we are seeing that buyers are willing to offer more per house than they were a year ago. So that tends to indicate, anytime you're at 100% or higher of asking price, that tends to indicate that we are seeing more competition in the marketplace. We're seeing buyers who are not aggressively trying to get below list price offers accepted. The only time that tends to happen is when there is at least the perception that they're competing against other buyers. Now, that second thing we want to look at is how long is it taking for properties to get sold in a marketplace? The faster they get sold, the more heat there is for buyers to make offers. Folks are acting more quickly. There aren't enough homes on the market, so you're tending to see homes getting sold faster. Again, in my local marketplace, what I'm seeing is in April of 2019, the average days to sell was 28, so 28 days to get a home sold. In April of 2020, we saw 21 days, so a week less to get homes sold now than at the same time 1 year ago. The fact that we're seeing folks being willing to offer asking price or more, and the fact that we're seeing homes selling faster indicates to me that we're not seeing a drop in the demand that comes close to the amount of drop we're seeing in supply. Now, of course, I'm looking specifically at my local community of Morgan Hill. You as a buyer, investor, seller, these are things you should be aware of in your own local marketplaces and figure out. Any agent should be able to help you figure those things out, but you can also use resources like Zillow's market pages. Now, Zillow's market pages are ridiculously hard to find. So if you want to find them, you can simply go to Google and Google Zillow market report your city. And hopefully you'll be able to find it. It's usually at the top of the search strings. But this is just a way for you to get a view of what's happening in some national numbers, what I'm seeing locally, and I want you to use this as a inspiration for you to check out what's happening in your local marketplace so that you're more informed. I think knowing this data is going to either make you a much smarter and more effective seller, buyer, and potentially an investor. And I know that in the other areas I'm looking at, when I'm looking at places like Boise and Phoenix for areas where I'm interested in investing, I'm continuing to see prices that are either flat or even declining a little bit in some of these areas, in some of these sub-markets. So keep an eye out for that. I think that there could be amazing opportunities for folks who have the facilities to take advantage of it. But I think it's also a time when folks might want to kind of buckle their seatbelt and get ready for a potentially rough second half of 2020. All right, folks, as always, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge on the table than I take up in your time. Hope we've achieved that today. If you've got any questions, concerns, anything at all that you'd like to reach out to me about, you can find me at my website, soldbyrobert.com. Happy to help any way I can.